Hi there, welcome to Twice to a pickup card reading. And for this reading, the question is, who were you in your latest incarnation? And you can choose one pile of cards from 1 to 12. You can feel drawn to a certain number, and you can also choose a favorite number, of course, for yourself and also for somebody else in your life. And even if this shouldn't be taken seriously, maybe synchronicity will help us still recognize some patterns in our lives right now that we need to work on or become aware of. So let's begin with number 1. So for number 1, your cards are prostitute and hero, heroine. So yeah, I believe that in your latest incarnation, maybe you were a person that would do almost anything for money. You would sell your soul to the devil if that was required or necessary. And some of you saw it as a big sacrifice because you misunderstood somewhat the principles of life in a sense of right and wrong and so on. You saw materialism as God, and I have to do this because money is so powerful, so godlike. That's how you saw it. But eventually some of you that chose this number might have realized, changed a little bit principles, and maybe you found somebody that could inspire you to climb the spiritual mountain instead, and to be a real hero, because some of you might have felt like a false sense of heroism, like I have to do this, because money is so important, but never realized that it's just money, and money is not God. And eventually, but some of you turned it around and you started to climb the spiritual mountain instead, and you had real purpose and goals, and you empowered yourself spiritually eventually. So that's what I've got. If you understand these cards in another way, that's good, but this is my interpretation. This is it. Number 1, number 2. Let's see. And for number 2, we have child orphan, so that's easy, and virgin. So I think that you were quite innocent in your past life. Maybe you are a war orphan, and you were also pretty naive, maybe a virgin all your life, even maybe because you lived in a culture where orphans were seen as untouchables, or because you chose later on to live in a monastery as a nun or as a monk or something like that. But at the same time, you were able to kind of make sense on your own of the world without having somebody putting ideas in your head. And you did lots of things maybe on your own, and had this purity of heart and spirit because of the card virgin here. Or another possibility is, of course, that some of you that chose number 2 were so alone in your life that you were very afraid of intimate contact with another human being. So that's another possibility, that you prefer to stay alone instead of touching somebody else, having to share something that you have with somebody else and so on. So that could be the case, because maybe you feel even in this lifetime a little bit that it is a little bit awkward, you know, like having to be too close to somebody else, or maybe not, it depends now, but this is what showed up for you. And maybe you have another interpretation, but this is my interpretation of these two cards. Let's go to number 3. Let's see what shows up under number 3. So wow, nice, beautiful. Knight and lover. So you were like the knight in the shiny armor in your past incarnation, and you fell in love with somebody, with you were probably a man, and then you fell in love with this beautiful female. And it was a little bit like in the movies, you know, when you have this knight that has to rescue the princess, or falls in love with somebody so passionately that he feels forever connected to this person, and vice versa, of course. And knight, this archetype, is very much associated with good relationships, with connecting with others. So it says here that it's about loyalty, romance, and chivalry, a love of honor. And lover is about great passion and devotion, and having great appreciation for somebody. And probably you were a very passionate lover, maybe as well, during your last incarnation, and you really appreciated the person you fell in love with. It wasn't just like I'm like a Don Juan, but rather a very deep connection, a huge love story, like you see in fairy tales almost, actually. So that's nice. You had a very nice life, and maybe you still believe in this lifetime in love, and you know that there is somebody out there that is truly special for you, if you haven't found him or her already. So that's pretty awesome. And the next pile, number 4, if you chose number 4, you are a thief and a networker. So maybe you were in organized crime of some sort, and you really knew how to communicate with others and have this network of underground people. Could be, you know, like a real thief, but it could be another type. Maybe you were, you know, maybe somebody that was maybe you went undercover because of other reasons, you know, and so on. And maybe you were a spy or something like that, you know. So but or you were a group of people that constantly were in touch with each other, sharing secret information, and information that you believed should be maybe kept a little bit secret, instead of sharing it with everyone else. Otherwise, as I said, maybe organized crime of some sort. And maybe in the past, you know, when it was the distribution of books was extremely expensive, and maybe you found a way, you know, to distribute and to make these books much cheaper. Who knows? That could be an interpretation. So this is what I have for number 4. And for number 5, let's see what shows up for 5. If you chose number 5, your cards are gossip and saboteur. So this is not nice. You were a person that would spread rumors about others to sabotage their life and work, and you didn't always have consideration for how others were affected. You just liked the idea of having this type of power over people. You were probably very good at it as well, and at some level, of course, there was a lack of self-esteem, and you could not see your self-worth. You had to destroy somebody else to know that there is no worthy competition. You couldn't empower yourself, and so this is what shows up for you. Maybe you recognize this in your own life today. Maybe some of you are paying some karma. Maybe you experience this in your current life, or maybe not. Maybe somebody can say something if this happened or not, but this is what showed up. If you have another interpretation that I can't think of right now, okay, but it kind of makes sense, this cards showing up together. So maybe in the end, maybe the gossip and everything also, and you led to problems in your own life, because in the end it was self-destructive. People kind of figured out that you are always lying, always gossiping and so on about others, and you tell stories that are not true, and nobody believed it. So maybe it turned into a form of self-sabotage in the end. And so this is what showed up for 5. Let's check out number 6. So number 6, you have artist and alchemist. So this is nice. I believe that you mixed colors. You were a painter in a past lifetime. You knew exactly how to make these colors because it was a real art. You probably was not only a painter, but you were also a little bit into magic, into alchemy in general, and you were interested in the occult arts, because it was very common in the past that people were all over the place. They didn't have just one occupation, just painter or just this or that. They were often interested in all. There wasn't, like a pure profession, like historian or a doctor. Everyone was in everything, so people knew things from many fields, and I believe that you were one of them actually, and you could create beauty. You knew how to mix and match things as well, and you could inspire others as well, and you could express also in what you wanted to say in very creative ways. That actually alchemy can happen within us as well, of course, and it can when we are inspired enough, or when somebody says something that really clicks and really resonates with us, we can go through a huge inner transformation. And this is all for and maybe your art is still around today, still affecting and transforming people in some sense. This is all for number 6, quite beautiful. Let's see number 7. So for number 7, rebel and messiah. So in your past incarnation, probably you weren't like everyone else. You believed in justice, you believed that life could be lived in any way you want, and you maybe rebelled and challenged authority, challenged norms in society, and so on. And maybe in a way, maybe you join some kind of religious group where somebody claimed to be the Messiah and so on, or you lived maybe in the time of the Messiah of Jesus, who knows. And because Jesus was seen as actually as a rebel in his time, because he didn't believe in the law as it was, not in the Jewish law and not in the Roman law. He had his own belief system that he was spreading around, and some people still believe today, that this message of love, of God within you, the Son of God, and all that we are all children of God, and self-healing, and all these ideas that Jesus was talking about. He was misunderstood, of course, but he was talking about like Buddhist thoughts and so on. That could be the case, so he was totally different, because in the Jewish tradition, there was like an eye for an eye, but just as Mahatma Gandhi said, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, and he would be the one who was rebelling against these ideas, and he spread the message of love. But of course, in the negative sense, maybe some of you that chose number 7 were people that believed to be some kind of false messiah. Maybe you were a rebel, but you weren't a rebel with a real cause, so to speak, so you could create some kind of disruption, and believe that you were spreading wisdom and love, when it's maybe you spread judgments against others, or whatever it might be. You were just angry, or you were just following a messiah, a false messiah. That could be the case as well in its shadow attribute, because that is also, of course, a clear possibility. Maybe you did live in the time of Jesus, or maybe you followed the wrong crowd, somebody that said, I am your savior, I am the only one that can save you, and you ended up doing all kinds of bad stuff in his name. Probably it was most likely a him in the past, but maybe you have another interpretation of these 2 cards, and you are, of course, as always, welcome to do your own, because maybe it resonates at some level. But this is it for number 7. Let's check out number 8. So for number 8, you have God and companion. So God was your companion, actually. So I believe that you were either a powerful person, or you are in the company of a very powerful person. So maybe you were the spouse of a very powerful person, because God, as an archetype, can represent a person that has large amounts of power, and that can use this power for good or for bad things, of course. Excuse me, this was the cat. So maybe you are the companion of this God person. You were maybe the wife or the mistress or something like that, most likely. Or maybe you were a very powerful person that could influence others, and you hated being alone, so you often had company. Maybe you are a male in female company, very much. And maybe you were also a powerful person that had, you know, a gang of people around him or her that had that were very loyal to him, and that could advise him, and that would always think about his best. And of course, this is the most likely interpretation, but God here, it says in its light attribute benevolence and compassion, recognizing the eternal force within yourself and others. So some of you might, as I said, you had God as a companion, or you found God in while you know, visiting some people, or in a group of people, in a group situation of some sort. Maybe you found that godly force, you know, so maybe you were in some type of religious group, but most likely, you know, if you look at this, it looks like an emperor, like a monarch of some sort, but you can of course interpret it as you wish, and how it resonates with you. And let's go to number 9. So for number 9, you have engineer and beggar. So that's very interesting, actually, because they are so different, you know, because an engineer actually can do something, create something, engineer something, is good with technology and so on, while the beggar is somebody that asks for help. And that's a very interesting combination. And who knows, maybe you were a person that was looking for systems that could help those in need. Maybe you wanted to find a system that was good for them, or to create a housing system that would help those in need. And maybe as an engineer, you were an engineer of some sort, but you were also very compassionate. And so on. Maybe physical survival in general was very important to you, or maybe you lost everything. You were an engineer, you know, very good at practical solutions, at technical problems and so on, but then maybe something shifted in your life, and maybe you lost everything, and maybe you live still with this kind of fear that, you know, you are going to lose everything, so you have to always be careful. And maybe it resonates with you at some level. In its light attribute engineer, it says here ability to give creative energy a practical expression, talent for designing resolutions to common dilemmas. And in its shadow attribute, reliance on mechanistic solutions without regard for emotional consequences. So it could be you could have been somebody that was trying to find solutions, and some of you were very compassionate, but others quite mechanical. Of those who choose number 9, there was a lot going on in your mind, lots of thinking about how to improve society, how to help people, but some of you got too mechanical maybe, but some of you might also have lost actually everything, because you couldn't make, for some reason it was very difficult, the type of job that you had, or in the type of society where you lived. Maybe you kind of ended up losing material resources. And you became maybe even dependent on others. So engineer could represent somebody that offers technical solutions, could represent a constructor, somebody that constructs houses, somebody that fixes things in other people's houses, that can design, you know, roads or railways or whatever it might be. But then you have the beggar energy, you know, a person that is quite weak and so on. So either there is compassion here, or you ended up a little bit in this situation. Maybe at some point you were very good at what you were doing. Maybe you were an architect, a designer, but then you kind of lost everything. You lost your money. Maybe there was some problem, drinking problem or something, you know, that kind of turned your life around a little bit. Because there are cases, actually, if you think about Gaudi, he was an architect, and he died very poor, even though he was so great, and nobody knew who he was any longer, and so on. So his life kind of shifted. So I'm thinking about that kind of situation. Actually, not that you were necessarily Gaudi, you know, he lived in Barcelona in Spain, but something like that, possibly. Let's see, number 10. If you chose number 10, ooh, in your past life you are a mediator, and you have a mediator and avenger. So I believe that you kind of was the person that talked with the opposition. So maybe you lived in a time and a place where there were like feuds between the government and some rebel group and society, or some group of people that would become even violent if they didn't get their way around, and you had that role of mediating between the state and those groups that wanted change in society and so on. So that could be actually the case. Let's see. In its light attribute, mediator is the gift for negotiating fairness and strategy in personal, professional life, respect for both sides of the argument. And on the card Avenger, it says desire to balance the scales of justice, righteousness on behalf of society or oneself. And therefore, justice, finding justice was also very important to you. Maybe you were also, maybe you were a lawyer, or you represented somebody that wanted change, or maybe you were a politician, somebody into politics. If you were on the negative, on the shadow side of this energies, then you know, this is an energy of negotiating with ulterior motives, and also, you know, the avenger takes the role of somebody that would threaten to blow things up if the change that he or she wants doesn't take place. So it's a threatening energy and so on. So maybe you recognize it if you are very good at communication during this lifetime. If you like balance, fairness, justice, maybe it makes sense to you. And that's it for number 10. Let's check out number 11. And so for number 11, wow, you were the warrior and the liberator. So you fought for peace, you fought to liberate others. Maybe you were lived during the French Revolution, or during a time when you fought for freedom, maybe freedom from outer dominance, from others, or maybe you saved a bunch of people. You worked to save some people. So you were definitely a warrior. You were fighting the good fight. definitely in your last incarnation. So you have in this light attributes: warrior, strength, skill, discipline, and toughness of will, heroism, stoicism, and self-sacrifice in conquering the ego, and for liberator, freeing yourself and others from outmoded beliefs, releasing negative thought patterns. But generally speaking, when you check these two cards out, it's clear, that you were a warrior that was fighting for freedom, or to liberate yourself and others, possibly. And this is all for number 11. Of course, you can also check the shadow side of this cards, and warrior would become somebody that would want to win at any cost, and maybe create lots of casualties, and so on. And liberator, of course, in its shadow is when a group gains claims to free people, and when as soon as they come to power, they begin to impose their own tyranny instead. So there is no change really, because there is just a new regime with its tyranny on those you claim to liberate. But I believe that it's most likely, of course, for most of you, it's in its light attribute. The light attribute is always much cooler. Of course, nobody wants to be the opposite of that, even though in real life people sometimes, unfortunately, are, because they are too afraid. And the last one, you have number 12. The number 12 is the visionary and the martyr. So definitely this is a very self-sacrificing past incarnation. Actually, you were somebody that believed in his or her vision so much that you were ready to die for it. Basically, you didn't care about your consequences. Maybe it was a time when reading somebody's future, let's say, was prohibited. You did it anyway. You want to help to guide people, and that wasn't liked or appreciated, but you still continued with your thing, or you had another vision of society or of life, and you truly believed in it, and so on. And you did everything you could, to improve people's lives, or to inspire them, or you held on to your belief because you believed it was good or superior, and so on. Or maybe you were a futurist in a sense. You saw things that nobody else could see yet. You were before of your time, and so on. So of course, in its shadow attribute, it would be like you had ideas, but you sold them to somebody else for money. You didn't hold on to your vision. You sold it, and you perverted your vision in some sense, and then you felt sorry for yourself because you said, oh, people fooled me, I don't have it anymore, because if I had kept it for myself, things would be so much more different, and so on and so forth. So it depends now. Most likely it's the light attribute, because I was thinking, about the light attribute, and there are some bad cards, some bad archetypes, so to speak, anyway, and they have showed up here, and they're in a couple of piles. So but this is it, and this is all, and hopefully you enjoyed this. I enjoyed reading the cards. Actually, I picked a number for myself, and it was quite nice and surprising. So I hope that you had the same reaction, and thank you for watching. Hopefully it made sense, it was helpful. Bye bye for now.